Hey everybody. If you're familiar with my audio essays, you can skip past the first couple minutes of this recording and get straight to it. Or if you just don't want to hear me ramble, you can skip past the first few minutes as well. But if you're listening to this right now and you're completely unaware of what this is, I'll break it down for you. For the last year or so, I've been doing audio versions of my essays. And the reason I've been doing them is because I get a lot of people who reach out to me and say, hey man, you know, I love your writing, I love what you do, but I just don't have time to sit down and read it. And, it made me think about myself, because the truth is I get sent, 20 to 30 articles every day. I mean, we're just inundated by information constantly, and I never get around to reading any of it. Well, at least most of it. And I always think to myself, it would be really, really nice if there were audio versions of these articles that I could listen to while I'm, busy doing whatever it is I'm doing. And, a lot of platforms do provide audio versions, but it's always read in some robotic AI voice that I hate listening to. And so I just bypass the whole thing. And I just thought, as a writer, it would be really nice for you, if you appreciate what I do, to be able to listen to what I wrote, if you don't have time to read it, in my voice. As bad as I am at reading out loud, and I guarantee you I will stumble all over the fucking place while I'm reading this, at least you hear it in my voice. And that's just the general idea of this. Until recently, the audio essays have been for paid subscribers only on my Substack, but I've decided to make them free to everyone across all platforms, mainly because, if you've been kind of keeping track of what I do, I've had to kind of pull back on producing the podcast in order to give myself more time and space to write. And so I just thought making these audio essays available to everybody would be a great way to kind of fill the gaps on the weeks where there aren't any podcast episodes and there's nothing really going on. And so, that's the gist of it. This is just a way for you to dig into what I wrote if you like the stuff that I write, and not have to find a quiet place to read it. You can listen to this in your car while you're working out, while you're doing the dishes, whatever the fuck it is that occupies all of your time. You can just hit play and listen. And so, that's the whole point of this. Today I'm going to be reading my most recent essay, Redacted Reality, Inside the Censorship Machine. And at the end, I will provide additional context. I'll expand on some ideas and just kind of provide some additional commentary, because whenever you're writing, there's always things that you want to explore, but you got to kind of stay within the bounds of the idea that you're covering. And so at the end, I'll expand a little bit. I'll talk a little bit more about some of these ideas. And if you want to read along with me, and if you're on Rumble, X, YouTube, or Substack, I don't even know if this will be on YouTube because I keep getting pulled right away. But if you're on Rumble, X, or Substack, just go in the description below this video and you can hit the link there and read along. If you're on an audio streamer like Spotify or Apple or any of the others, you can go into the description of the episode. The link will be there as well. And if not, sit back, relax, and I'll do all the work. Let's get into it. Redacted Reality, Inside the Censorship Machine. They call it the censorship industrial complex, a malignant blob of intelligence agencies, neoconservative establishment figures, legacy media, NGOs, multinational corporations, and tech giants. Their latest target was Telegram founder Pavel Durov. He was lured to France under the pretense of a meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron and arrested on the spot. The Russian billionaire is currently an open-air prisoner, on bail in a country that ecstatically granted him citizenship after throwing Vladimir Putin the middle finger in response to requests Durov hand over the encryption keys to his secure social networking platform. Putin didn't pursue Durov outside of Russia's borders, rather. He allowed the Telegram CEO to operate relatively undisturbed from the United States, UAE, and France. However, Putin's restraint could have something to do with Telegram being his military's main communication platform. Maybe that's why the CIA tried to coax one of Durov's engineers into sharing info on Telegram's encryption technology, or why FBI agents paid him a visit during a trip to San Francisco. Until recently, the American deep state was in favor of free speech because it benefited them tremendously. They were able to foment revolutions and coups around the world with relative ease via apps like Telegram. There was no longer any need for the tedious grunt work that went into secretly training guerrilla armies in the Amazon or blowing an African dictator's airplane out of the sky. Now they could mobilize millions of citizens with a nonstop feed of propaganda through social media platforms without having to suffer the painstaking cover-up once the job was done. They could depose virtually any democratically elected leader of their choosing and present it in the media as an act of courage carried out by an oppressed population. There would be no further agitprop required since it was the covertly propagandized population themselves who produced the desired outcome. And as we've come to understand about the intelligence apparatus, if you let them camp on your lawn, they will eventually move into your house. When Durov denied the Blob's demands to build a backdoor into Telegram that would authorize them to bypass the platform's complex encryption tools, he poked a bear that doesn't discriminate between friend and food. In prior years, Telegram played an invaluable role in their hegemonic conquests, but now they found themselves circling the perimeter of an iron curtain they never anticipated being unable to penetrate. Google, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and others had all folded under the 1,000-pound paperweights of the U.S. State Department. Even TikTok bent the knee to a certain extent. Telegram was committed to maintaining its position as the safest and most secure online communication service, which was a tolerable forward-facing ethos in the eyes of the neoconservative establishment, as long as they were permitted to peek through the windows. French authorities have charged Durov with crimes connected to the distribution of illegal content such as terrorism materials and child pornography by third parties on his platform. The arrest and charges had to occur in a country outside of the United States because within the U.S., social media platforms are protected under Section 230, a law that provides immunity against criminal indictments for content published or disseminated through their portals, in the same way the U.S. Postal Service wasn't responsible for maiming victims who received packages from the Unabomber. To arrest Durov on U.S. soil would mean serious infringements of constitutional and judicial law. Not that either would necessarily deter the neoconservative political engine from doing such a thing, but it could potentially set a precedent that would remove protections from all social media platforms, much of which are still extremely valuable to them and add a ton of horsepower to the American economy. That's not to say France doesn't have its own motives for arresting Durov. They've lost influence over a number of African nations to Russian-backed military coups, effectively cutting them off from dirt-cheap natural resources required to keep their country operational at the lowest possible costs. Therefore, visibility of private Russian military comms is something French intelligence would unequivocally appreciate. In 2016, WikiLeaks published thousands of internal emails that sank Hillary Clinton's presidential bid. She was the clear establishment candidate who would continue the global pilfering enacted and expanded by the Bush and Obama regimes. The military-industrial complex so desired a Clinton administration it worked exhaustively to walk back what was plainly written in emails between staff members that implicated them in a vast array of grotesque political maneuvering. When the blob could no longer contain the torrent of Clinton corruption, they switched gears and focused on dominating the internet in totality, particularly as it related to perceptions of newly elected President Trump. Donald Trump wasn't supposed to be the 45th commander-in-chief. That was never supposed to happen. His surprising talent for managing complicated relationships with foreign adversaries was a godsend to the American public and the world at large, but was a mammoth tusk in the side of the deep state machine that depends on armed conflicts not only to justify its own existence, but also to impose its will on whichever nations it wants to extort. Trump was bad for the intelligence business, and they countered by sabotaging his administration both from the outside via Hollywood and legacy media, and on the inside through the neoconservative scaffolding that has wrapped itself around nearly all of the bureaucratic institutions. Many within the machine blamed the email leaks specifically for Hillary Clinton's catastrophic political disintegration. What they failed to understand was that the leaks were just a starting point for a rapid process of discovery that followed decades of criminality extending as far back as her work on the Nixon impeachment. We learned the true nature of the Clinton Foundation, which functioned as the nucleus of a money laundering enterprise similar to mafia-owned casinos in 1970s-era Las Vegas. And the festering underbelly of the Clinton empire was now at least partially exposed, all at the behest of a free and open internet. 9/11 was a wake-up call. Interconnectivity allowed us to ask the lingering forbidden questions tugging at the forefront of our minds. We distributed documentaries created on stock editing software and built communities devoted to digging up the truth beneath CIA-sponsored mainstream news narratives. COVID-19 was intended to be the fait accompli, the closing act of a 19-year theatrical production orchestrated by the same hidden cabal who had so effortlessly directed the messaging over radio and television airwaves in decades past. Vaccine passports were a beta test for digital IDs and central bank digital currencies. Travel restrictions were a soft introduction to 15-minute cities. We were expected to sleepwalk into the mouth of the monster and slide quietly down its throat. Were it not for figures like Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, whose ghosts roared at us from exile and solitary prison cells, many of us may have found ourselves traveling through its digestive tract. But the internet ensured their distant voices could still be heard, and the spirit of freedom carried us through a barrage of brutal assaults on our humanity. Nearly 20 years of delicate calibration came undone all at once. The public lost trust in our social, political, and media institutions as we realized they were never acting in our best interests. They were always working to keep us unconscious and subdued. The Twitter files laid bare the blueprint for targeted censorship, and for the first time we saw a mechanical view of the nuts and bolts in the machine. The EU answered with the Digital Services Act. Canada has the Online Harms Bill, or Bill C-63. Australia and the UK enacted legislation that criminalizes hate speech in the same fashion. Elon Musk opened the floodgates of his acquisition of Twitter, now rebranded as X, and has become an important luminary in the fight for free speech. Brazil has banned the social media platform, and the EU is threatening to do the same. Mark Zuckerberg, or more pointedly, Meta's legal team, recently penned a letter to House Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan, confirming suspicions that the Biden Democrats pressured Facebook into censoring users who shared information contrasting the official government line on a variety of issues. It implies, for now at least, that Meta's CEO is aligning himself with Durov and Musk in defense of our basic human rights. What's evident is that although the mass censorship conspiracy appears to have its roots in the American deep state, the branches have grown to encompass nearly every country in the industrialized world. Pavel Durov is the latest high-profile casualty, but what should alarm anyone in view of the unfolding events is that the borders between these countries are rapidly dissolving through coordinated efforts that stretch beyond cooperation between allies. The vines of globalism are tangling themselves around previously sovereign nations to a degree where it's impossible to discern one from the other. We are collectively racing toward a future where every modern society will be homogenized under the same tyrannical laws and regulations, making it essentially impossible to escape totalitarian diktats such as the one we're facing now. There's something that lives leagues below even the most clandestine state actors, and it's that entity pulling the levers on some of the most powerful governments the world has ever known. So now the question is, who or what is in the abyss? All right. Stumbled a little bit toward the end there. Sorry, everybody. I know that makes it a little bit more difficult to listen to. I will get better at this as time goes. I am far better at this than I was a year ago. So, yeah, I'm working on it. This essay, I've been thinking about this subject for months and how I wanted to attack it. Because mass censorship, there's so many components to it, and there's every component, every element leads to a deeper discussion. Free speech in general, there are arguments on both sides, valid arguments for free speech and against. And I'm going to be exploring some of the arguments against in the future because I think that there are valid arguments there. I've always lived as a free speech absolutist. I've always been somebody that believes that everybody should be free to say anything they want, no matter how terrible or awful it might be. But I'm starting to kind of change my position on that. Not that I don't believe in free speech at all, but that, if you go on X, you're just hit with a deluge of just constant information, and a lot of it isn't information, because what a lot of people don't realize is that that the people behind what you're seeing on your newsfeed operate as a business, and their business is to just like the legacy news business, their business is to generate clicks and views in search of those ad dollars. And so the independent media, quote unquote, has become the legacy media in a lot of ways. And I think I'm going to explore that a little bit in a future essay, actually maybe the next one that I write. But for now, I really wanted to kind of write a general essay around what we're seeing. And when Pavel Durov was arrested, I immediately recognized, okay, this is our bird's eye view. He's a really good example of the whatever is underlying all of this. He's a really good example of how the extent to which they will go in order to stop free speech. And so that kind of covered like 90% of what I wrote. And the thing is, when I started writing this, I thought that Pavel Durov was just going to be the starting point. I thought he was going to be a footnote in the essay that I wrote, but he ended up kind of that story ended up swallowing most of it. But it is a really good example of where we're going. And I don't think Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or anybody else is safe from this machine. I think what the machine is doing is that it's going after the easiest targets first and the most threatening. And I think Pavel Durov is a tremendous threat to them for the reasons that I outlined in the essay. I mean, the Russian military does use Telegram as their communication platform, and there are a lot of dissenters and dissenting voices on Telegram that I'm sure the American deep state and whatever is beneath them would love to have access to. And I think, and it's obvious to anybody who's watching from the outside that that's why they're going after him. I mean, they don't care about child pornography or child sex trafficking or, terrorism or anything like that. They really don't. And, when it comes to like the child sex trafficking stuff and the child pornography, I mean, as we're coming to learn, as time goes on, that a lot of these people who are so outraged by it are actually involved in it. And so, I mean, it's very, very obvious why they're going after Durov, and he is another domino to fall in their fight against free speech. And you look around the world and it's I don't think it's any coincidence that all of these countries are coming up with all of these laws that mirror each other all at the exact same time. There is some coordination happening. And, I have my ideas as to who or what is behind it, but I don't think we quite know yet. And I don't think we will know unless we keep digging. And, this essay really is kind of point A for a longer and much more thorough exploration that I'll be doing in the future, because I really do think that free speech is the issue of our time. And we have to find a way to not just maintain our right to speak freely, but also to label, tag, categorize, and highlight stuff that is actually misinformation. And there have been attempts to do that in the past with fact checkers and community notes on X and stuff, but I don't know. I don't think that that's a real foolproof way of stopping misinformation from spreading at a rapid pace, just because a lot of people don't believe the fact checkers anymore, because the fact checkers all prove to have some sort of political lean and bias. And so the whole fact checking industry kind of upended itself. So I don't know what the answer is, but that's going to be some of my further exploration on this. And I think that this essay was one of my least read essays in the past while, and it is also just another sign of where we're going, because writing about censorship and the end of free speech doesn't alarm anyone. Or at least doesn't grab as much attention as, say, when I write something mean about Justin Trudeau or Kamala Harris or whatever. But it should. It should. This is at the root of everything that's coming toward us, and we really have to attack it now, and we really have to shed light on these issues now. And so, like, I know, within this culture war, it's people generally react to, people saying mean things about their perceived enemies, but this is This is the root of it all, and this is what they're going for. This is, in the very near future, if we don't stop this, you will not hear my voice or read my words, and your voice won't be heard. So we have to go after this now. Anyways, that's it. All right, I've talked for long enough. For 20 minutes in. Thank you all for listening. As always, if you would like to subscribe to my writing and to the podcast, you can do so at bravenewnormal.substack.com. You can also follow me on X at JasonJamesBNN. Everything is there, available there as well. And thank you all for listening, and thank you all for your time. I'm working on getting better at this. Doing the podcast has helped me become a better speaker, but I'm still working on that. So we're only going to grow from here, and it's only going to get better. So once again, thank you all for joining me on this ride. Thank you all for listening today. And subscribe to the Substack page, man, if you haven't. And there's a lot of you who haven't. So please do. All right. Peace.